So today I wanted to cover this amp that I've never actually tried before, and I've set up 3 scenes, which you heard me using scene 1, which is the clean plus trem in the intro, and then I've got basically a bit more drive plus Zen drive, and then 3 is more drive again. Yeah, I wanted to cover this amp because I'd never really tried it and I didn't really know too much about it. I looked at Yek's amp guide and I've done a little bit more reading on the amp, and I think it's one that you might want to check out if you're into kind of Fenders and stuff like that. This video is brought to you by G66 UK. You can buy FM3s, FM9s and Axe-Fx 3s in the UK now without a wait list. And yeah, go check out, if you're interested in the Fractal units, go check those out there. And there's also a UK service centre and you don't have to pay import charges. All good news. Right, so the amp in question, the 6G4 Super. So this is based on a BrownFace Fender amp that was made for a few years. That BrownFace era sits between Tweed and Blackface era. And one way to understand this, I guess, from a simple point of view, is that the Tweed era amps are a little bit more raw and a little bit easier to get to break up. And then at the other end, the Blackface amps that came out in the mid-60s, the idea of these amps was essentially to be cleaner and louder than the amps that came before, as you know, things moved on. Another point is that these amps initially weren't actually made just for guitar. They were made for harmonicas, basses, and all sorts of other pieces of equipment, banjos even maybe. So the Tweed era amps, I was watching an interview with the guy who I think makes Victoria amplifiers. He was saying that basically the Tweed amps have more bass and mids that go through into the circuit, and that's why they break up a little bit earlier on. By the time Blackface came along, those had less mids and a little bit less bass, and so they broke up less early on. So you can think about the Blackface as a bit of a smoother tone, and then the Tweed as a bit of a more raw tone. Now, in between that are things like this, the BrownFace amp, which the Super came before the Super reverb, and this was still before Fender were building reverbs into their amps. So it's just got your normal gain or volume, bass, treble and presence, no mid control either. I've paired it up here with the factory Rumble EVM speaker with the 4047 mic, just because I really like the way that cab sounds, a bit darker potentially, and yeah. But the thing I noticed about this amp really was it's just that really sweet spot between Tweed and Blackface where you've got kind of full mids but a bit higher headroom. It's just a really beautiful sweet spot, and I think that maybe this is what people love the BrownFace for. There was also a harmonic trem in the actual amplifier, so I've added that here, harmonic trem type with the rate 1.927. I like slower kind of trems and the depth at 80%. So we'll just, also up front here, I've got a compressor, the Dynamicomp with the mix 83, pushing the level ever so slightly. So amp settings here, I think these are just what happens as soon as you pull the amp up. So gain at 5. A lovely big warm clean. As we increase the gain up a bit further, you can get a bit more break up. So starting to get a bit furry around the edges there. So yeah, can't really get super high gain anything out of it. Basically a clean platform, but just a little bit warmer than potentially Blackface, and potentially a little bit softer and less raw than the typical kind of Tweed tones as well. I'm using a large tiled room for the reverb here. The mix at 20%. We could just boost this up if we want. Because they wouldn't have normal reverbs, I guess I wanted to get the sense of it just being played in a big room, essentially. So then for the drive tones, what I decided to do, I've got the drive before the compressor just so it doesn't jump up in volume quite as much. And the amp, then I've taken the gain up to 7.5, and then we're using the Zen drive, which, yeah, basically I think Tweed amps you wouldn't necessarily want to push with something Tube Screamer-esque. Blackface amps love a Tube Screamer. The BrownFace is somewhere in the middle of both, and I think the Zen drive worked really nicely. I've pushed up the tone and taken down the drive a bit and leveled down a bit. So 4.11, 4 drive, voice 5, and tone at 9.84 gives this love. Just really thick, soupy kind of drive, but you can still hear the strings coming through. And then for this one here, what I've done, taken the bass down slightly, taken the gain up even more, and then same Zen drive in front. So you could experiment with changing some of the tubes out on this if you wanted to as well. Could be interesting. I think I did experiment with this briefly, but scene 1, I think I've got a different set of tubes, but they make subtle differences really more than kind of extreme ones. Some sound a bit brighter and that sort of thing, but give that an experiment. But yeah, I just wanted to do a little video about that because I was just really enjoying not only the cleans but those drive tones as well. Just such great soupy drive tones. So if you wanted to grab that, I'll drop that into my Gumroad folder. It's kind of like a dynamic folder where if you save the link, basically, you're going to get to see these presets as I drop them in, as I'm doing kind of weekly videos, creating new presets, exploring new stuff within the Fractal universe. I hope you're enjoying the journey as much as I am. But this was one of the Fender amps in the Fractal universe that I'd never tried. You know, I'm not sure that I've heard of a super amp before even. I've heard of a super reverb, which maybe that'll be a future video, but the super exists in this little kind of pocket between Tweed and Blackface where they were doing BrownFace amplifiers and blonde. And yeah, this sort of transitional period before they even stuck reverbs on their amps, you get these lovely kind of mid-heavy, soupy kind of tones that just take pedals really well. give that a try. And let me know if you've got any thoughts on other great BrownFace amps